And I'm going to talk about resume and interview skills tips. So let's go ahead and get started here. One of the first things is who's this guy and should I listen to him? I grew up in rural Kansas, started my career after college in New York City, then moved to Kansas City after that. Been involved in interviews for entry-level positions up to $1 million positions. Background, management consultant, former Fortune 100 corporate executive. I help companies understand roles and responsibilities inside their companies and the key attributes that they need to be looking for to fill those positions. So a lot of these topics kind of come up in those. And there's a lot of things that you can do as far as going out and Googling, watching videos, whatever, on resume tips, interview skills, those kind of things. This presentation isn't a summarization of that. I don't attempt to do that. What this is I'm going to share with you what I've observed over the years, specifically whether it's a rural or a big city environment, startup companies or established businesses, big corporations or small businesses, what I've kind of seen to be true. So one of the big questions, where do you kind of start on this path of getting all your things, sort of all your ducks in a row? Number one, I would suggest you view your job hunt as a product marketing pitch. That product's you. And so you need to figure out what exactly you need to stress about yourself and how that fits the needs of the prospective employer. So first off with that is understanding what the employer is really wanting to know about you. So capabilities of doing the job, that's one of the aspects, but that's only one. So that's kind of the table stakes. Can you do the job or can you quickly be trained to do it? So that's one of the big items, obviously. But also number two is, are you dependable and not too risky? It costs money and it costs a lot of time to try to fill positions. So companies don't want to bring somebody in and then quickly find out that they're a bad fit. Or that they have risky behaviors and they have to fire them, replace them quickly type of a deal. So the third item is, and this you kind of learn longer in your career, one of the other big aspects here is, can we get along? And this is really dependent upon how tight the labor market is too. If you're going up against just a few applicants, then the hiring manager is really just going to be looking at you as, can we tolerate this person? The bar isn't very high. If you show capabilities and you're dependable, they're going to be, hey, can we tolerate them? If there's a lot of applicants for the position, they're going to be a little bit more choosy, and they're going to be a little bit more of, hey, am I going to enjoy working with this person day in and day out? You spend a lot of time at work. So getting along is a pretty big aspect of that qualification for you. A lot of people don't really understand that, how big of an aspect that is in the beginning of their careers, but it is. Because if you don't get along, it can be very disruptive to the work environment. It can be very disruptive to customers. It can just be a bad situation. It's much better when everybody kind of fits together well, and it's a good, well-oiled machine. So once you kind of understand what the employer is trying to, what questions about you they're trying to answer during this process of your resume and interview and all those kind of things, now you want to kind of figure out what your pitch is. So you have to create a pitch that answers those employer questions above. And you don't just answer it in one spot. You try to be uniform and answer it throughout the process. So step one, clean up any risky social media posts. This is becoming more and more important, and it will be checked by a lot of your hiring managers prior to them calling you in for an interview. This is before formal background checks and things like that. They're going to go out and take a look at your social media posts. They might even Google you, see what pops up. They're going to check to see if there's any risky behaviors out there. So make sure that when you view your social media, that you kind of view it from a how would people interpret this? So maybe you're goofing around and but it's displaying something that's illegal. If your prospective employer looks at that and sees that, they might not understand some of the context there. And all they see is that that's risky behavior that potentially will look bad for them. And that might cause them to have to fire you, or that you aren't dependable, those kind of things. So make sure that your any risky behaviors like that are cleaned up. Step 2, make sure that you understand that the resume is speaking on your behalf. So when they're reviewing it, it's speaking on your behalf. So make sure that it's not just generic. Make sure that it speaks powerfully. Make sure that it puts you in the best possible light. And so we'll go in a little bit more detail about some of the ways that you can do that here in a little bit. Step 3, view the interview as a conversation with someone you just met. Look to get along, look to be interesting, show interest in them. So some of the things that you would do if you're just meeting somebody and you're wanting to sort of make friends with them, get along, use those same kind of techniques. A bonus item is, do you know an influencer that can help you jump steps? If you know somebody that works in that company and you can get them to be a reference for you or to forward your information over to the hiring manager, in addition to whatever upload processes they ask, but to forward it over to the hiring manager, that is huge, because automatically that kind of gives you a couple of check marks that remove some of the riskiness that an employer is trying to figure out about you. If you don't have somebody that works inside the company, do you know somebody that knows the hiring manager? Maybe their kids go to the same school with one of your friends or something like that. If you know of somebody that knows them, sometimes that can help influence it too, and they can pass that information along. So any of those kind of things that if you can tap into an influencer, they can help you kind of skip steps. So to kind of get into a little bit finer detail here, one of the items with your resumes that you have to go through is sort of a first filter. In a resume, the job specific sort of lead-in section. One of the ways to make sure that a screening bot or a HR analyst that might not be a subject matter expert in your area, that may not understand the lingo that you're using, to make sure that they don't inadvertently dump you out, make sure that you use the same language and phrasing that you see in that job posting. If they call something by a certain name in your resume, make sure that you call it by that same name. You could potentially use an acronym for it, and that HR screener or that bot doesn't recognize that acronym because they're looking for that full name, or vice versa. So make sure that you're using the same language, the same phrasing that you see in that job description. Every time that you do a resume to post it in, it should not be the same resume for every single employer. It should be roughly the same resume, but it's not the exact one. You're going to need to touch a couple of items on it each time. And you should spend, 10 minutes to update it specifically for a specific employer. Go in and change some of the phrasing. 90% of the content's going to be the exact same. 95% of it's probably going to be the exact same. 5% of it you're going to have to change around. One of the easiest ways to change around your resume to make it look tailored to a specific position is having a lead-in section that just kind of basically lays out the check marks for what they have posted as requirements. Kind of show you a quick example of that. So over here on the left, here's a resume with this requirement skills match. In the posting, it said master's degree required. So right off the bat, it actually had MBA. So right off the bat, it said MBA. It also said 10 years experience in financial planning, cash flow, marketing loans, these kind of things. So right off the bat, just jotted it down. Boom, just jot down the things that they said was required. That way, if an HR analyst that's not familiar with the position is looking at the requirements and they look over here at this requirement skills match, boom, they see everything checks the box. They pass that resume along. That resume just made it through the filter. They didn't even look at the rest of the stuff. All they're interested in is, does it match up with what's in the requirements section? Now, if you don't have a requirements section like this at the very beginning, that analyst has to go through and decipher everything that you put down on your resume, and they may or may not pick things out correctly. If they don't pick it out correctly and it's to your disadvantage, you just got dumped and you did not pass along to the next filter. So to prevent that mistake from occurring, one of the easiest ways is just to kind of have a front section right here at the top. Then you go into your traditional career education summary. If you have quite a bit of experience, you can put down selected accomplishments. And that way you're leaning into your most powerful aspects, your most powerful things that you've done. Don't think that you have to put 3 bullet points underneath every single one of your positions. Maybe one of the positions you only had 1 really good bullet point. In another position you had 5. Don't put 3 underneath each of them, because you're going weak on a couple and you're missing out a couple. By having the selected accomplishments on the bottom, it really kind of puts you in a best light. Now, if you're a college student, maybe you're looking to try to get a position before you even graduate. You're looking for being as a part-time employee. One of the things that you can do to try to help answer some of those questions that we talked about being dependable, being less risky, those kind of things, by putting something out in here. You can say, hey, I'm a current college student applying for that part-time position you have done. Here's what I'm looking for. You know, kind of saying this one bullet point that says friendly, polite, respectful to customers and coworkers. What's that do? That reduces risk. Quick learner with a positive attitude. You know, they had in there 2 years experience, mandatory, working an on shift or an on-time shift work environment. So just stuck that right back in there. They said they were looking for a dependable and hardworking person. Hey, just repeat their phrase, put it right in there. And that they had to be open to hours and duties as needed. Boom, right in there. So that's how you can kind of phrase that stuff out and put those. So to lead off with where you just match up with your job description, exactly with your resume sort of top point, that's the piece that you would switch out each time that you go to a different position. The rest of the stuff is probably all not going to change. But that front section, you can easily change that out specifically to the job description to make sure that you can get through those first line filters. Nothing worse than you being the perfect candidate, but you got booted out because an automated filter bot didn't recognize that you hit all the criteria, or that an HR analyst didn't decipher correctly that what you were saying was really the same thing that was listed on that job description. Use the same phrase, put it in there, make sure that you don't accidentally get dumped out. Another question, should you list your GPA? This really all depends on what the expected other applicants are going to have for their GPAs. So if you have a 3.5 or above, go ahead and absolutely always list it. Now, once you get further into your career and you got a lot of work experience, nobody really cares about your GPA. But coming out of college in your first couple, yeah, they're going to care about your GPA in a lot of the positions. So if you have a 3.5 or above, go ahead and list it. That shows a little bit of, hey, they must have been a good worker. They must have some intelligence. Hopefully that means that we can train them better, those kind of things. If you have a GPA that's 3.3 to 3.4, probably go ahead and list that one too, but make sure that it doesn't put you in a negative light. If you're applying for a position that typically is going to be filled with people with high GPAs, like 3.7 or above, let's say a lot of competitive folks applying for Google, or they're applying to NASA or something like that, where you expect a lot of smart people to be applying, their GPAs are probably going to be real high. So if you put down a 3.3 reflective of versus them, you might look weaker. So in that situation, you're probably better off not having your GPA listed. Should you ever list it if it's below a 3.3? Well, that depends on if the position Typically, I'd say no, but it all really depends on whether or not the position typically employs folks with GPAs below 3.0. If they typically are filled with people with GPAs below 3.0, if you list out a 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, hey, you're going to look actually above the norm. So that's actually going to be a good quality. So go ahead and use it. If a position is listed and says you must have a 2.5 or above, hey, you got a 3.2, put that sucker down. That's better than what they're asking for, and that's probably better than what they're normally getting. So, so kind of use that a little bit of a guide. It's really all reflective. It's all dependent upon who you're going up against. It's who's your competition. So once again, you're a product. Is that other product better? Is that other product relatively worse on that attribute? So, so you highlight the things that you're most positive on, and you don't highlight the things that you're most positive, that you're not positive on versus your competition, those other job applicants. Fancy graphics or visuals. You know, that can make you look, that can make you help you stand out, depending upon if you're maybe even a specific position. If you're a graphic design person, that might be table stakes. You have to show some flair. The most important thing is when you do these fancy graphics and visuals, make sure that the key words that that you want to be stressing about yourself and stressing about your background, make sure that those are in standard text and not like in a pic format, because those bots might not be able to pick it up. And so if they can't pick it up and decipher what you're saying, they may inadvertently think that you don't match up with the criteria that they're looking for. And then all of a sudden you get dumped out and not a single human saw your resume and saw how wonderful you were. So make sure that those things can be picked up. And even if the latest bots can pick up all that stuff, well, you might be applying to a company that has an older technology. If that older technology does not pick it up, you're not going to get picked up. So just be aware of that with fancy graphics and visuals inside your resume. Market your experience to your to answer your employer's questions and provide interview conversation points. So if you can answer the questions that they're kind of wanting to know, you know, can you do it? Do we think we can get along with this person? Are they dependable and not risky? If you can answer those things in different ways and how you phrase on your resume, and it can turn into a conversation point. Remember, we're trying to have a conversation during the interview. So if you can have things in your resume that call out items that that interviewer is interested in, that might want to talk more on, then that's great. That's good phrasing. So one of the things I kind of laid out here was sort of a do this, not this type of a thing. So let's say that there is a applicant and they worked in college, they worked as a Walmart cashier. So I would say what they should say is, hey, as part of that, they have money handling experience and they have 0 disciplinary actions. What that tells the employer is, oh, hey, they're dependable, they're responsible, trustworthy, because there's no disciplinary actions. So that removes risk in that statement. Now, a lot of people will just list, I ran the cash register. That doesn't really tell me anything. It doesn't tell me if you ran it good or if you ran it bad. It doesn't tell me if your register was short all the time or what. It doesn't tell me if you got in arguments with the customers. It doesn't tell me any of that stuff. The other one, by saying 0 disciplinary actions, that tells me, oh, they must do it pretty good. They weren't short on money. They weren't arguing with customers. It's the exact same position, but it's laid out differently. Another thing along with that, community service hours. Community service hours, a lot of people have those on their resumes. And one way that you can kind of pick it out is, once again, put that in the best light. So do this, actively involved in giving back to the community. 300 plus hours volunteering to assist the local innovative food pantry with diner. So somebody sees that and they go, huh, okay, well, they like to give back, so they're probably a pretty nice person. They're civic minded, community minded. They're probably going to be a good asset for the company. They're probably going to, you know, we're probably going to be proud of them. They might even be, we might even have some PR from them for some of the things they do. And it might even draw something where they say, They might ask you about that. They might ask you what made it innovative, those kind of things. Now, that exact same bullet point in an unimaginative, generic way could have just said 322 hours of community service. They don't really know what you did. You might have been picking up trash on the side of the road, which is fine, but it doesn't tell them that you can interact with customers like the other way did. They could be looking at that and say, hey, you might have been on probation and that was what you had to do. You had to do that many hours in community service. It doesn't tell them anything. The other one is much more expressive and can potentially jump off into a conversation a lot easier. The next thing I would say is 0, 0, 0 spelling mistakes. You cannot have spelling mistakes on your resume, period. There is nothing worse, and I have seen this repeatedly, there is nothing worse than somebody listing a bullet point that says they're detail oriented, and then in the next bullet point there's a word that's misspelled. That will destroy your credibility in your entire resume and get you dumped out. You cannot do that. When you finish with your resume, have somebody else look it over. You look it over the next day. Make sure it's clean and it doesn't have obvious spelling mistakes like that. That will get you dumped quicker than anything. Final check. So on your resume, you've got your resume, you're getting ready to submit it. The next thing you want to make sure you do what the directions say. If they say there's a cover letter required, make sure you put one in there. One of the questions is, well, what should you do with a cover letter? There's lots of things you can go out and Google and look at. One of the things I would suggest, keep it short, sweet, upbeat. So 3 paragraphs. And that first paragraph is one single solitary sentence. And all it is doing is telling the person that's reading it what the job description was that you're applying for. So the example there, I was glad to hear of your opening for XYZ. Look forward to the opportunity to discuss. Then you go into the next paragraph. The next paragraph is all about discussing your qualifications for that position and any affinity that you have for that company or organization. Companies have egos just like everybody else. And so if you tell them that you've always liked their products or you've always wanted to work there, or there's some kind of an affinity that makes you want to work there, put that in your cover letter. That can be enough to kind of make you stand out. And if all things are equal, that could be the thing that is a differentiator maker as to you getting an interview and them feeling stronger about you. And it might even be a conversation point once again during the interview. Anything that you can have that's a conversation point that makes them feel like they're having a conversation with somebody will make them more comfortable with you. And those are always good. Third paragraph, wrap it up with a specific reference to your resume and a call to action. So please see the accompanying resume for further details, blah, 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 blah. So that's kind of the listing out of that. Just short and sweet, keep it upbeat. Then check to make sure if they tell you to upload it in a specific format, make sure you upload it in that format. If they tell you to upload it in Word, don't upload it in something else. If they don't say upload it in PDF, do not upload it in PDF. If they say you can upload it in Word or PDF, upload it in PDF. The reason you want to upload it in PDF is sometimes Word will format differently on different machines. And so what you think is aligned out perfectly in Word, sometimes will get pulled up on another machine and the alignment's off. So what you thought fixed all on one line now maybe wraps around and it's off. By putting it in PDF, by saving it to PDF once you're done with the Word document, and then uploading it in PDF, if they allow it, that sort of fixes that formatting. And so you don't have to worry about those alignment issues. That's the advantage of being able to upload it in PDF. But if they don't say you can upload it in PDF, do not upload it in PDF. You upload it in what they tell you to upload it in. If you don't have what they're telling you to upload it in, go out and Google how you can get that so you can upload it in that. That's really important. That's following directions. That'll get you bumped out if you don't do it. Double check that you did everything requested. If you don't do something that they've requested, if they ask for 4 references and you provided 3 because your resume has 3 on it that you applied for last time and you did not update it to adjust it for what they requested, you will probably get dumped. People will look at that and they'll say they cannot follow directions, therefore they're a risk, because they're not going to follow directions once they're an employee. Once again, you want to remove that risk that that employer has as a question mark on all the applicants. So you've gotten through everything and now you're on the interview. So what are some of the things to look out for on the interview? Arrive 5 to 10 minutes early. And whether that's a video conference or in person, don't arrive 15 minutes early. You do not get bonus points if you're earlier than 10 minutes. You actually will get negative points because now you've just made everybody in the office awkward because they think they're making you wait too long. Don't arrive too early. If you're physically interviewing and you arrive 15 minutes early, set out in the parking lot until it's 10 minutes till. Also, on the other side, don't come sliding in the door right on time. And for sure, don't show up late. Once again, if you show up late, people are going to think that you're risky, you're not dependable, they're going to have concerns about you. You automatically just went down in their eyes as far as top candidates. Okay, so you've gotten in the door. View the interview as a two-way conversation with somebody new. Try to find out things about them when you get a chance. Talk to them in a expressive kind of way, be animated, like how you would be a person. You don't want to be a robot sitting across from them. You want to be expressive. But always remember that person's evaluating you for risk and work group fit. So keep all your comments professional and appropriate. And when you're in a setting that isn't a traditional interview setting, like maybe you went to lunch or you met for coffee or breakfast, whatever, don't get trapped into thinking that you're not still in an interview. You are still in an interview. You're still being evaluated. You're still being assessed as to if you're a risk to the company or not. An example, early in my career, worked for a company that was in New York, and they were very, very good about how their interview process was with new candidates. And it just so happened this employer, all the candidates that they interviewed were all top-notch, really good people, Ivy League schools, good business schools. And they had a sort of a tailored process where each person that was interviewing the person kind of had a slot where they were trying to figure things out about the person. And then they'd hand them off to the next person. And if they kind of graduated out after the third person, then we would take them to lunch, and then they'd kind of have a little bit more of an extensive interview. So, so after I'd been there a little while, I moved on to the lunch interview person. And so you'd take them out to lunch. So this particular person came through fantastic school, great resume, everything looked great. They went through the first few interviews. The interviewers were like, thumbs up, this person's a rock star, great. I take them to lunch. We're sitting there at lunch, and they kind of relaxed, and they made a few inappropriate comments about some ethnic groups, and I'm just kind of sitting there like, okay, this person's going to be a big risk for the company. And so then when I went back, they were prepared to make an offer. And so I had to relay what I had discovered during the lunch. And so so we didn't make the offer. And so this was a person that went to lunch. They let their guard down because it was in a different environment, and you're always being evaluated. So no matter what that is. So the other thing, when people are asking you questions, keep your answers short and to the point, and answer what is asked. Don't go off on a big trailing tangent or anything like that. Read up on mirroring body language. Mirroring is a very, very effective technique, especially in an interview process. So read up or Google on that, and that will help you throughout your career, especially if you're going to go into sales. That is a fantastic technique to understand. Last but certainly not least, ask the interviewer questions. Do not skip this step ever. Even if they've answered all the things that you walked into thinking that you knew, don't skip the step of asking them questions. My very favorite question to ask is this first one. What do you wish you could change about this company, and what would you never want to change? The answers to those questions reveal so much inside information for you that by asking that simple question, you can learn so much inside information that then later, if you have two competing job offers or something, you can weigh this one so much more powerfully because you've got a little bit of a feel for what it's going to be like to work there. Maybe it's absolutely phenomenal, fantastic. And when you ask that question of the other company, it sounded terrible. And they come in relatively the same salary range. It's a clear-cut winner, which one you're going to go with, just because you asked this question. Also, if you're talking to members of the team that you're going to be working with, a lot of times you'll talk to folks that are going to be your peers, and they work for the same supervisor that you're going to be working for. So you ask them and just replace the company piece with the supervisor piece. So ask them, hey, what's the one thing you wish you could change about the supervisor? What's the one thing you'd never want to change? Once again, you're going to learn so much about that person that you're going to be working for, that it will help highlight to you if this is going to be a good fit or not. Remember, this whole process is also to find the good fit for you too, not just the employer finding the good applicant. You want to find the best employer for yourself as well. Then third, this is a great closing statement because once again, remember, we're kind of pitching a product. This is kind of a marketing sales kind of an approach. And a great question is there anything that would prevent you from recommending me for this position? If they answer with anything, you have the opportunity right there, sitting in front of them, to try to mitigate that, address that, try to highlight something else in your background that addresses that concern that they have. Try to fix that issue that they have with you. If they answer back that no, there's nothing that prevent me from recommending you, you just cemented in their head that you're a good candidate for the position. And subconsciously, they've already put that in their head that you're a good candidate, which is fantastic. So this is a great question to ask at the end. And so make sure you do that. So just kind of as a recap, view the job hunt as a product pitch. And your goal is to move your product, up each one of these steps until you get up to the job offer and beyond. So step one, skills. Are you capable of doing the job or quickly trained? Your resume has to speak powerfully on your behalf to this. That skills assessment or that skills piece that the requirements match up with the job posting, that's critical. Step two, behavior. Are you dependable, not too risky? So clean up those risky items to alleviate fear, whether that's social media, whether that's showing up at the correct time for the interview, those kind of things. Make sure that anything that's risky, phrasing the cash register thing to show that you didn't have any disciplinary actions, that removes risk, that anything that kind of gives them trust, those are good things in your favor. Step three, okay, now you got the interview. Can we get along? And they also do some additional step 1 and 2 validation. So they've interpreted what your resume has said, they've interpreted what some of the other things are, but now they've actually got you in front of them. And so now they're going to talk to you and they're going to evaluate you on step 1 and 2 again. But more importantly, they're really kind of stepping in on, can we get along? Can the work team get along? Will you be good with customers? Those kind of things. Remember, over here to the left, the influencer X factor. We talked about how you can potentially get knocked out in step 1 and step 2 just from screening. If you have an influencer, you can skip step 1 and 2 and go right to step 3 with the interview. That's why if you can find an influencer, that's fantastic for you, because it makes sure that you don't inadvertently get knocked out. There's a study that says that if you have somebody that forwards your resume and information over to the hiring manager that you're probably going to be 10 times as likely to get that position. You're going to get that job offer 10 times as likely than if you don't. That's why it's so important to sort of see if you do know an influencer. And if you do, that helps you so much. So once you get through the interview process, they make you a job offer. Fantastic, you're almost there. So they've made you an offer. Maybe it came back and the salary isn't as much as you were hoping for. This is when those questions that you had earlier, excuse me, this is where those questions that you had earlier about what would you love to change, what would you never want to change, those kind of things really can help highlight to you, is this going to be a good fit? One of the answers that came out of that kind of question, they might have said, one thing that is phenomenal about this company, you start in kind of at a lower salary, but they give you such great raises. There's such great advancement opportunity. The bonus structures are so favorable. You make 20% more than your salary in bonuses. Maybe you wouldn't have heard that otherwise. Conversely, the other position that you're thinking about maybe pays $5,000 more. But when you ask those questions about the supervisor, you heard that they were just absolutely horrible to work for. They want you to be on call all the time. And you look at that and you're like, you know what? The $5,000 less position probably is the smarter way to go. And sometimes you will see that. So, so just because you got the job offer doesn't mean, that's the one that's right for you. So step 5 is really where you sort of agree on terms. Once you agree on terms, it's not over yet, because now you go into step 6. Step 6 is really kind of the feedback loop. What you were saying, is it true? What they were saying, is it true? So you start out, and if you misrepresented your skills and were not honest, they're going to figure that out real quick. And if it's a big enough issue, you're going to be let go. Likewise, if they promised you a certain work environment and you get there and it's totally off, you probably should think pretty hard about leaving that firm and getting a different one. And if everything checks out and you guys are doing you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, you move to step 7, you remain employed, you go forward. So that's really, from my perspective, that's kind of how I view the whole resume interview skills kind of process, from when you first identify a position to when you actually start and it's a good fit. So hopefully there's some things there that have been helpful for you. So good luck on your journey on that. I hope you find a very good career that's rewarding. Don't be intimidated by the process. Just go in there and know that it truly is a two-way street on it. It's just as much about you finding the right fit for you and your career as it is for that employer. So with that, I will go ahead and let you all go. So thank you. Bye-bye.